right, we're welcoming our participants.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Just welcome everyone.
All right.
We're going to get started here momentarily. We're just going to wait one more moment in case there's anybody clicking in.
Let me get my slides up.
Yeah. Well, we definitely thank you all for joining us today. We're almost at the start time. Again, we're just giving another moment in case any of the other folks are registered or hopping on.
All right, sounds good.
You can probably go ahead, Pearl. It's been another minute, and if anybody else comes in late, we will just let them in.
Sounds good. All right, thank you all for joining. Today we're going to be talking all things neurodiversity, which is something I'm very passionate about and excited to talk about. And just to kind of kick us off, if you have access to the chat there, and if you want to just put in a word that comes to mind for you when you think of neurodiversity.
I'm thinking of my word, Pearl. What would my word be?
I don't know. Right? What comes to mind?
I know. It's challenging.
Challenging.
Everyone
That's
is
a good one.
so different. Like there's so many different levels. I think they're challenging.
Yeah.
Like it's so new, right? When each person has such a different vibe, different needs, different experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What word comes to your mind?
I think what comes to my mind is unique. Okay. Unique perspectives. Yeah. We're going to get into it today. Yeah.
All right.
So we can just kick off and get started here. Let me just make sure I got my slides going. So, all right. So just going to kind of walk through what the agenda is going to look like today. We're going to start with some introductions of myself and Dr. Heather, who is me. We're going to talk about what neurodiversity is, kind of the definition there, what's that movement about. Then we're going to get into common neurodivergent disorders. We're going to talk specifically about autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, talk a little bit about the misconceptions there with each of those conditions. We're then going to get into how neurodiversity relates to mental health, talk about the science, about the neurodivergent brain, and finally, treatments that are, mental health treatments and other treatments involved with neurodivergent folks. And finally, celebrating the strengths of neurodiversity and neurodivergent individuals. So to start, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Pearl Polito. I am a clinical intern here at Allow Health. I'm also pursuing my master's in clinical mental health counseling at Northwestern University. I included a picture of my dogs here, Louie and Shadow, who are just very fluffy and awesome, and a fun picture of me ziplining a couple weeks ago, which I have never done before, but it's now like my favorite thing in the world, so I'll probably be doing it again. So I'll give it over to Dr. Heather to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Marybeth Heather. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor here based in Maryland. I hold a PhD in counselor education, so I also provide university supervision and work at a university as a counselor educator outside of being the clinical director and running the group practice Allow Health. You can see here on the slides, I have some of my little sweet fur babies as well. The sweet puppy is Murphy, and then we have Melody here. They are besties. It's a Halloween picture, and then I love the water, so it's a picture that I've taken here of the sun by the water. So it's a little fun things about us.
Yeah, and both Louie and Murphy joined our morning meeting today, which was really fun.
Yeah. They were having doggy stare-offs, right?
Yes, yes. So, what is neurodiversity? So, neurodiversity is the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways. So, the idea is that there is no one right way to think, learn, or behave. And it's a relatively new term in the psychology sciences. So, it emerged just in the late 1990s by the sociologist Judy Singer. However, it's gaining a lot of significant traction as we are learning more about human cognition and behavior. And I think it's, gaining a lot of traction, as our society becomes more open to neurodiverse folks and different perspectives and uniqueness there. Neurodiversity also refers to the diversity of all people. However, the term is often used more frequently when discussing neurological or developmental conditions, including autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, which we'll get a little more into. And a big part of the neurodiversity movement is that it views neurological differences as natural variations rather than deficits. So, having autism, having ADHD, it is not something that necessarily wants to be, we want to take away from that person. It is a part of that person and how they view the world and their perspectives. So common neurodivergent disorders. We'll start with autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as ASD. So ASD is a neurodevelopmental condition that is characterized by differences in social interaction, communication, and behavior. You may have also heard of the term Asperger's, which used to be its own condition separate from autism. However, in later versions of the DSM, we now include Asperger's within autism. So Asperger's is not really a term that we use anymore. It's now autism spectrum disorder. And so the name autism spectrum disorder includes that word spectrum to really emphasize the wide range of abilities, challenges, and characteristics that individuals with ASD can exhibit. And these can include different variabilities in social communication, behavioral diversity, and differences in both cognitive and sensory profiles as well. Let's look at some common misconceptions surrounding ASD. Pretty common one is that it's a common myth is that all autistic people are the same, which we just kind of talked about on the last slide. Autism is a spectrum disorder with a wide range of symptoms and abilities. And individuals with autism display many different combinations of both strengths and challenges. So, two people who have autism next to each other might exhibit it in very different ways and may experience it in different ways as well. Another common myth is that autism is a disease that needs to be cured. And this is a very, harmful rhetoric. Autism is not a defect or an abnormality, but it is a natural variation of the human experience. Going back to that concept of neurodiversity, we want to view these conditions as a part of their human experience, not a deficit that needs to be cured. Individuals with autism have many unique needs, as well as strengths. There are a lot of strengths that come with being on the autism spectrum. Another myth, autism people lack empathy. Research actually shows that autistic people carry intense empathy that can sometimes be overwhelming, and they also may express empathy differently. And then kind of going off of that, another myth is that autistic people cannot form meaningful relationships. And the truth here is that many individuals with autism have strong and fulfilling relationship with others, and they may show affection differently, similar to empathy there. And so I think a great example of this is the show on Netflix, Love on the Spectrum, which is a wonderful documentary, that showcases different people with autism navigating the dating world, navigating romantic relationships, even sometimes marriage. And it shows that they, communicate in different ways, show affection differently, show that empathy differently. But they're very, very capable, of having those fulfilling and meaningful relationships. And then finally here, another myth is that autism is a childhood disorder. And the truth is that autism is a lifelong condition. And the needs of autistic individuals, may alter as they move through different stages of their life, but it's not something that they grow out of or that goes away. It stays with them.
And it'll, continue to be something to be aware of. Like you're not a person that is has to be defined by the one thing, right?
Yeah.
You're a person experiencing ASD. It's a factor in your life. It's not you. I love this one, right? Famous people you don't think about.
Yeah, right? Famous people that maybe, you knew some of these. I definitely was, some of these were a surprise to me. Jerry Seinfeld, of course, popular comedian. We have Greta Thunberg, who's an environmental activist. Tim Burton is the guy with the kind of crazy hair and sunglasses. He's a writer and director. Albert Einstein. So a lot of people up here who've had, very successful lives and careers while living with autism spectrum disorder. So next, we'll get into attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, known as ADHD. So ADHD has gone through a lot of changes with its name through the last few decades. In the 60s, it was known as hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. And then a couple decades later, we changed that to ADD, which is still, sometimes used today, although the term ADHD is what it is known as in the DSM. And so when it was known as ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, it had two variations, with or without hyperactivity. However, late 80s, when they revised the DSM again, they changed the name to ADHD to include that hyperactivity in there. And so this new name now combines inattentiveness, impulsivity, and hyperactivity into a single type. And so symptoms I just listed here: inattentiveness, having problems staying on task or being disorganized is a common characteristic. Hyperactivity, being extremely restless, not being able to sit still, constantly moving. Yeah. Impulsivity, acting without thinking, maybe interrupting others or having difficulty with self-control. And then another one that I don't think is, commonly talked about is hyperfocus, becoming so engrossed in a particular activity that you might lose track of time and external surroundings, which can, you can imagine may have its positives to that, but can also, have some limitations as well.
And for those who don't know, the DSM is a diagnostic manual that's used in the medical and mental health profession. It's kind of like our dictionary for diagnosis.
Yeah.
And they're always editing and updating it. It's something that's used in the United States and many other countries. So it can be somewhat transferable, but not 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now we're on the DSM-5 revised edition. That's the current one that is in use. So looking at some misconceptions surrounding ADHD. First one here, all the ADHD looks the same. This is similar to autism as well. Some individuals with ADHD show more hyperactive symptoms, while others may show more inattentive symptoms, or both. So again, similar to autism, all people with ADHD are going to exhibit it differently. Another myth is that only boys have ADHD. So it is true that twice as many boys are diagnosed with ADHD. However, there are still many girls that are diagnosed, and girls with ADHD are actually more likely to experience those inattentive symptoms rather than the hyperactive symptoms. And so those hyperactive symptoms that boys relatively experience are more external and can be picked up more easily by parents, teachers, Those inattentive symptoms are more internal. And so that could maybe explain why more boys are diagnosed with those hyperactive symptoms rather than girls with those inattentive symptoms. And then bad parenting leads to ADHD is a common myth. The truth
Right.
here is that there's no single factor that leads to a child having ADHD. Genetics and environment are both at play, and the causes are still being studied by scientists today. Medication is the only way to treat ADHD is another common myth. There are behavioral therapy methods that have been proven successful with treating ADHD. And these treatments often focus on behavior, social skills, organization, to help treat the symptoms there. And then finally, people with ADHD cannot be successful. The truth here is that there are many people with ADHD that go on to graduate from college and have very successful careers. So it's absolutely possible to be successful while having ADHD.
Most definitely.
Most definitely. Included some famous people here with ADHD as well. I got a lot of actors, Ryan Gosling, Emma Watson, athletes, Simone Biles, the GOAT. So yeah, lots of famous people here with ADHD. And then dyslexia. So dyslexia is commonly recognized as a reading disorder. However, there are implications that reach beyond reading included in here. So it's primarily characterized as having difficulties with phonological processing, such as the ability to recognize and manipulate sounds in language. And so there's a few different differences going on in the brain here when it comes to dyslexia, one being working memory. So the cognitive system that's responsible for holding and manipulating information. Processing speed, so the time it takes for a person to perceive, process, and respond to that information that they're taking in, or executive functioning as well. So processes that include planning, organizing, problem solving, self-regulation. So there's obviously, a lot more going on behind the scenes here with dyslexia beyond, reading comprehension. So some misconceptions and myths surrounding dyslexia. Common one is that smart people cannot be dyslexic. The truth here is that dyslexia and intelligence are not connected whatsoever. And most people with dyslexia are intelligent and also very creative individuals. Dyslexia is rare is a common myth, but it's estimated that 17% of the population has dyslexia. And people with dyslexia cannot read well. It's also common. Many people who are dyslexic are terrific readers with the appropriate interventions throughout their education, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those interventions later. And another one, finally, is that a child who switches numbers or letters around must be dyslexic. And the truth here is that it's actually common for children to do this in the early stages of learning how to read and write, and that doesn't necessarily mean that a child is dyslexic.
And with this, I know I was letting Pearl know I was going to share a personal story. When I was growing up in high school, I got tested by a school counselor for dyslexia with like a short test because they definitely mix up some letters and numbers. And the piece with that myth, smart people can't be dyslexic, right? So I was told that if I went through a full testing process and got labeled in school, I wouldn't be eligible for the classes that I was in at this time. This is like years ago. Things are different now. They would have had to take me out of streamlined classes, even though I was doing well and a teacher was saying, hey, I think something's going on. They kind of said, hey, we can't even go there, right? And be able to get accommodations to maybe make things easier for me, which, hey, would have been nice.
Yeah, right.
But still to this day, I haven't been tested, right? So you kind of have to be aware of that. Like, what are some things that might have stand out? Did you need, even with any of these, did you need some extra time or time for processing or more help or prompting to learn or to do something? And that's okay, right? You can still be successful. It just takes that practice and guidance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Having those appropriate interventions can be life-changing. Right?
For sure.
Yeah. And then finally, some famous people with dyslexia. We got Walt Disney, Cher,
Whoopee.
Anderson Cooper, Keanu Reeves, in good company here. Albert Einstein again, both autism and dyslexia there. Very interesting.
Double feature.
Double feature, yeah. All right, so now we're going to get into how neurodiversity and mental health are connected here. So to start talking about comorbid challenges. So to start off with autism, anxiety can also be really common for people who have autism disorder. So that can come from social struggles, sensory sensitivities, a need for routine. These can all contribute to heightened feelings of anxiety for individuals who are autistic. For ADHD, emotional dysregulation can be really, really common. So individuals with ADHD, as we talked about, can have some difficulty managing their emotions, which may lead to impulsivity and mood swings. And so that can really lead to a lot of emotional dysregulation there. And so with dyslexia, depression can be really common. With dyslexia may come those academic struggles without the proper accommodations and support. And that can have a lot of harmful effects on an individual's self-esteem, especially as a young person going through school. And that can lead to, self-esteem issues throughout their life as well. So these are common challenges that neurodivergent folks have in the mental health world.
The word comorbid, that's again a kind of a medical term that you'll see. It's the things happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So exactly. It's a 2 for 1 or more than 2, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people will experience multiple things, right? They'll have anxiety and they'll have the sensory piece at the same time, right?
Exactly.
So
yeah.
Just think about that as more than one happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So some societal factors that may be affecting the mental health of neurodivergent folks. Many individuals who are neurodivergent can experience stigma and discrimination at different points of their lives, whether that be in school or in the workforce as an adult as well. Lack of accommodations, which we've talked about, in both education and the workforce, it can be a constant problem for neurodiverse individuals. And our society often misunderstands neurodivergent disorders and misinterprets the behavior of individuals with these disorders. And that's why it's so important to talk about neurodiversity and learn about these unique perspectives that we all have, that can help, alleviate some of that misinterpreting, because if we have that misunderstanding, that can often lead to stereotypes and stigma and discrimination. So having, more open discussions surrounding neurodiversity can be really important here in making our society more accepting of all people. Yeah.
And being aware that these are just a few of the different types of neurodiversity. Yeah. There are many, many more. These are just 3. And even within the 3, there's lots of subcategories. So definitely be aware there's many more.
Absolutely, yes. So how can society create more inclusive educational settings? So first bullet here, incorporating individualized education plans, or IEPs. So IEPs are tailored to specific needs of neurodiverse students. They can help students receive both academic and social support needed to be successful in school. There's also something known as a 504 plan. These are also helpful in providing accommodations for students with disabilities. And it's named after Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. And so that's where that number 504 is coming from. It's also important to educate teachers so that they understand and are better equipped to work with neurodiverse children. Training educators in this area can really help them be more ready to accommodate for different learning styles. And I think this is really important because I think even, neurotypical people, we all have different learning styles where we absorb information better than other ways, whether that be visual learners or auditory learners, or, having to, write something or do it yourself, right? So, having those different learning styles, visual aids, auditory aids, can really help everyone, especially neurodiverse children in schools. And then finally, creating safe spaces for students where they can physically take breaks during the day to decompress when feeling overwhelmed. I think this is especially important for children with ADHD who may be struggling with that emotional dysregulation that we talked about. Having, a calm corner or a sensory room to just kind of take a break, regulate those emotions, and then come back to the day can be really helpful for those folks.
Yeah, and there might be a lot of different things in there, like a chair that you can sit in, maybe a bean bag, something on the floor, a fuzzy rug, or a hard space that's cold, different little things to play with and move.
Yeah.
Slime.
Right? Oh, yeah.
Slime's get a little messy, be careful. Kinetic sand is also something that's awesome. That could be in there. Anything like that. Sometimes people will use stones or have different kinds of things to hold in their hand to have weight. All kinds of different things can be in these kinds of spaces.
Yeah, activating those senses, all about that. Accommodating workplaces. How can society create more accommodating workplaces? So offering flexible working arrangements such as, more flexible hours or permitting remote work options, which is, I think, a growing thing that's happening, and adjustable workloads to help neurodiverse individuals handle their responsibilities and workloads easier. Also training employees, educating them about neurodiversity, which can help, increase that awareness and making that more inclusive work environment for everyone. And providing assistive options such as, noise canceling headphones for employees who may be sensitive to sound, ergonomic workstations that are more comfortable for certain folks, or specialized software that can help make jobs more accessible to everyone, not just neurotypical people.
I think we all need these work accommodations.
Yeah, right? These can help everyone. I want them. Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, how can we create more inclusive support community spaces? So providing sensory-friendly environments in public, reduced noise, controlled lighting, clear signage can also help make public spaces easier to navigate and also more comforting for neurodivergent folks, moving through community spaces, and including more inclusive programs in the community that cater to the needs and interests of neurodiverse individuals. So these can include art classes or sports and social clubs. There are many different ideas here that we can think of, but I think, the goal here is going to be about, creating that social engagement and creating that sense of, positive well-being and connection. Next, we're going to talk about the science behind a neurodivergent brain and some of the research there. So, some neurobiological variations around autism, ADHD, and dyslexia. We're going to talk about all three of those. So first, with ASD, there's been some research done around autism that has found differences in brain activity involving social cognition between people with ASD and neurotypical individuals. And so these differences that they found are alterations in our neural network in our brains, including our mirror neuron system. And so mirror neurons fire when we are both doing an action and viewing someone else doing that action. And so these are also the neurons that are responsible for helping babies to imitate other humans that they are seeing, which can help with, learning and practicing new skills. And these neurons can also cause us to feel emotions when we see someone else experiencing an emotion, right? Mm-hmm. And so this can be a common struggle in people, with autism who may have these differences, with mirror neurons, which may lead to, that common misconception that they can't experience empathy or other emotions. But the truth is that they can. It's just that their brains process it differently. They have those different variations of those mirror neurons. They're there, but they're just, processing that information differently. And that's why a lot of those misconceptions and misinterpretations may come when communicating with neurodiverse folks, especially on the autism spectrum. Research centered around ADHD has found that an ADHD brain has actual differences in the structure of the brain regions that control attention, impulse control, and executive functioning. And so executive functioning can include problem solving, organization, etc. So the actual structure of the brain there is different for those certain areas and can cause those, challenges with those areas. And then similarly with dyslexia, studies have found that people with dyslexia have differences in the development of the left hemisphere language areas, such as the temporoparietal cortex, which is responsible for understanding of language and all that. And so there's, developmental differences there in the brain in those areas for people with dyslexia. And there's also been a lot more, broader research around neurodiversity as a whole. And so this research has also helped our understanding of brain plasticity, which brain plasticity refers to our brain's ability to adapt and reorganize itself as we experience and learn new things throughout our lives. There's also been studies on our neurobiology, which has highlighted, as we talked about, many variations within the neurodiverse population. So individuals may share a diagnosis, but their symptoms, their strengths, their challenges, and their neurobiological profile as a whole can also differ very widely. And then there's also been advances in genetic studies that have helped us understand the different genetic variations or the different specific genes that are associated with increased susceptibility to neurodiverse conditions. So you may have a specific gene that, increases your chances of having autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and so on. So finally, we'll talk about some treatments for neurodiverse folks. So mental health support, cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT, is a big one here. Can help neurodiverse individuals manage anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues by teaching coping strategies and also working on problem-solving skills. And included with CBT, techniques can be used such as, relaxation exercises, cognitive restructuring, which is a therapeutic technique that kind of helps people identify and replace negative thought patterns with more positive ones. And goal setting is a really big one here too. And using all these techniques while acknowledging the uniqueness of the individual as well. Mindfulness practices, meditation, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. These can all help neurodiverse individuals manage their stress and anxiety while also improving that emotional regulation as well. And then support groups. So participating in support groups with other neurodiverse individuals can provide emotional support and reduce feelings of isolation as well and help with that, connection with other people who may be struggling with similar things. I included some, examples here of support groups, the Society for Neurodiversity, Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, Spectrum, these, are more broad across, the country. And I'm sure there's also, local communities to see, or local communities that have more localized groups. And we also have some resources at the end as well, which we'll talk about.
And when we're thinking about mental health, right, it's going to determine whether you're going to get peer-to-peer support, like a support group, some of the examples here at the very bottom, or if you think you want to do more of a traditional approach, like do counseling, a treatment plan, a goal, might be more CBT oriented.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mindfulness practices is also going to be either individually or in a group, right? Everything doesn't have to be one-on-one. You might have a mix. You might have a different type of provider. It could be a counselor like Pearl or I. It could be a psychologist. It could also be a social worker, a nurse practitioner, even a psychiatrist, right? And there's a wide range of mental health providers that will be providing these kinds of support. Here we Allow Health, we do more DBT, which has CBT embedded in it, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and a lot of mindfulness practices. Whereas an executive coach is something that's not covered by insurance, would also fall into these categories, right? That could be someone that went through a training program, or it could be a counselor or psychologist that has a coaching practice only, which is very pinpointed on the actions and behaviors. It's just a little bit different support process.
Absolutely. I also included some other treatments here that are, popular, in the neurodiverse community. So occupational therapy is something that helps individuals develop skills for everyday life, such as, fine motor skills or organizational abilities, more of that, executive functioning skills there, and also sensory integration. And then there's speech therapy, which can be helpful in assisting people with communication difficulties. Self-advocacy training can also be really important for neurodiverse folks to help empower them and encourage them to speak up for their rights and also, make decisions about their own life. Job coaching can be helpful to find jobs where they can, showcase their strengths and meet their goals. And also there's a lot of strength-based therapy approaches as well that help promote, positive self-image and lead to, improved well-being.
And some of these are long-term and some of these are short-term, right? So a speech therapist might meet with you, anywhere from 3 to 10 times and be done. Same with the occupational therapy and give you kind of home activities. Whereas a self-advocacy training might be like something you sign up for, you do a project with it, and you're done. Job coaching can be a little more long-term. Some job coaches help you get the job, and then you're kind of there, and they check in on you periodically. Whereas others you might see have the person physically going to the job with them as well. And we'll have some more resources for you at the end. And thinking about the strength-based approach, Pearl, right? Strength-based is all about the language. Like, are you talking about ADHD being the hyperactivity being annoying and disruptive? Are you talking about the creativity and the ability to focus and overcome challenging tasks? Are you talking about the things as tools and skills that the person is using to their advantage? Or are you always focusing on how they disrupt others?
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Strength-based language is so key.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very important in these situations. And so finally, for our last segment here, a couple slides just, celebrating neurodiversity, embracing differences, and also talking about strengths. So I created this little word cloud of different strengths that come from being a neurodiverse individual. So you had unique perspectives in here, empathy, attention to detail, innovative, persistent, communicative, supportive. What else is in here? Excellent memory. These are all things that come from being a neurodiverse person. And having those different outlooks and perspectives on life can be such a huge strength and superpower. And speaking of superpower, I have a quote from Greta Thunberg here, who we talked about before. She's an environmental activist who is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And this is a quote from her. She said, "No, autism is not a gift. For most, it is an endless fight against schools, workplaces, and bullies. But under the right circumstances and given the right adjustments, it can be a superpower." And I think this really kind of encompasses what we talked about today, how there are many challenges that society puts up against neurodiverse folks, but it's all about making sure we can be supportive of these communities, allowing them to have their accommodations so that, their perspective, their unique perspective and outlook on life can be used as a superpower. And so I just really loved this quote. And I think it really is a good wrap up to what we talked about today.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. And so again, like I mentioned before, I wanted to include some resources here. The Kennedy Krieger Institute can help with education, assessments, coaching, and family support. The ARC is a young adult psychiatric rehabilitation day program. DOORS is the Division of Rehabilitation Services, which helps Marylanders with disabilities go to work and live independently. And then Special Olympics of Maryland, of course, as well. And then included some of the shows that, I think have good representation of people with neurodiverse disabilities. So Love on the Spectrum, which we talked about before. Big Bang Theory is another one. And Atypical, I think, is a really great one that follows a story about a autistic boy in high school. So yeah, these are some of our resources. Dr. Heather, I don't know if you had anything else to say about those.
We'll say these are, you're good. These are pretty specific to Maryland. So you definitely want to be aware that this is what we have in Maryland, knowing that a lot of these places do have wait lists, right? And if you register, you may not get the quick and supportive response you're always hoping for, that you're in the middle of something, right? So when you're ready, just know you're getting a resource, and you're going to go through a process, but it can be a little bit more time consuming and length to actually get in to see somebody for a specialty than you would really like.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, and I think that was it.
So we left the remainder of time for questions. Anybody has a question, you would move over to the Q&A box. I'll put a little prompt here. If you have any questions, we are more than happy to answer them. Or feedback is welcome too.
Yeah. And if there's any, questions that come up, feel free to email us as well. That's also an option. Right.
And if you are trying to unmute or anything for questions, I know that the way that the webinar is set up, it won't let you unmute, so you will have to put the question either in the Q&A area or the chat box.
Yeah. All right. Maybe there aren't any questions, and that's totally good. But yeah, we'll take it. Thank you very much for joining. Again, you can reach out to us if you have any questions and follow-up. But appreciate you all joining.
Yeah, and you can reach the practices intake email. hello@allowhealth.net. If you have questions for us or would like to schedule a free 15-minute consultation to see if any of our services are going to match what you're looking for or your needs, we're able to provide individual counseling. We do have a DBT group running, so that helps with skills and development. Both Pearl and I are able to help out with these things. So if you are interested in that, you'll be able to view our calendar right from our website too. So you can just reach out and schedule some time and see if you need some help from us. We're happy to help.
Wonderful. All right.
Thank you all for attending.
Bye.
Bye.